Good. Welcome, everyone. Although this is the new normal, I still have to get used to the fact that I see many people, but I can't see them. So welcome, everyone, to this webinar on single-use plastic ban. Sorry, we also had a dog joining, which is a bit loud. Thank you for joining all of you regarding the single-use plastic ban. We at Sustainable and Inclusive Business, so my name is Karin Boomsma, we thought collaboratively with the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, and also with KEPSA and other key players, that it would be very useful to discuss more about how are we going to implement this single-use plastic ban in restricted areas. So the last webinar we organized, we got a lot of questions around how do we do this practically? Is this going to be in place soon? Who's doing what? Do we have already good examples? Do we have alternatives ready? So we really like to discuss that today. And we have also Dr. Macharia from the Ministry of Environment joining. He is the Director of Awareness and Education. And that's exactly the purpose of this webinar, to raise more awareness, but also discuss and educate and inform about alternatives and implementation of the ban. My colleagues have prepared a small presentation that runs us through some facts and figures that makes it very easy to then dive into details. So thank you all for joining. We would love to have your questions. We are here to make it relevant for everyone, not for us to just present what we like to present or what we think is relevant. So kindly raise your hand, post questions so that we can really have an interactive discussions.
Hello, everyone. Can you all hear me? So my name is Josephine Wawira. I'm the communications officer at SIB. For this webinar, we have prepared an infographic with some quick facts, not detailed so that we don't get lost along the way, but just a quick preview of the single-use plastic ban, which I'd like to take you through quickly. We will also share this with you after the webinar so that you have time to review and have your input, and feel free to share your feedback with us. So the objective of the infographic, one is to give all the industry players, so we are looking at hospitality, we are looking at tourism, travel, MICE, and any other represented industry in this webinar, give you access to available options to the single-use plastics that have been banned in the country. And we also want to provide linkages between you and suppliers of all these alternative products, because we understand, especially in Kenya, we don't have a database where we have put together providers of alternatives to single-use plastics. So we are working on a directory that later on we would like you to let us know if you're interested to have it, and that way it will be easier for you to access alternatives. We also want to help suppliers understand some of the alternatives that behave like plastics, such as the biodegradables, which is a large topic that I think we might have to have another webinar for it, because there's a lot of push and pull on what biodegradables are and whether they are the best solutions to the single-use plastics. So some quick facts that will, trigger your minds into seeing why the single-use plastic ban is important. For instance, in the next decade, we might have, or we are probably going to have 40% more plastics are produced across the globe, and 73% of the waste in aquatic ecosystems is non-biodegradable. So you see the danger posed to the aquatic life. with all the plastics along the beaches and in the waters, which is why protected areas such as the beaches were some of the areas that the ban on single-use plastics was implemented earlier this last month on June 5th. In Kenya, an average of 0.5 kilograms of waste is generated per capita daily. That is per person in Kenya. If you do that comprehensively, then with our population, then that's a high waste, a high level of waste. And only to think that 9.5 of this is plastic. And unfortunately, less than 10% of these plastics are recycled in Kenya. And remember, we are pushing for recycling and reusing of materials rather than disposing them off to landfills. Globally, only 9% of this is recycled, and 79% of it sits on landfills in our environment, creating eyesores and air pollution. And definitely the end result is, you know, danger to our health, for instance, by plastic ingestion through microplastics in water, and sometimes they even end up in our food chains. The Kenya Plastic Action Plan, prepared earlier by the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, KAM, has proposed a national recycling target. And this target is about 66% annual growth from the current one, which is 9%, that is an approximate from earlier this year. By December 2022, that is approximately 1 year since earlier this year, then we target that we will have recycled 15% of the plastic waste in the country. And then by this January 2025, hopefully we will have recycled 27%, and 30% is the target for June 2030. It is an ambitious target, but I think with the collaboration of the government and the private sector, then why not? We can achieve it. And we have made a long, we have come a long way as a country towards our plastic-free journey, and we have also been recognized as one of the top countries in the world. So we deserve to applaud ourselves for making major progress and major strides towards becoming a plastic-free country. The most recent milestone is on June 2020, on 5th, when the effect of the single-use plastic ban was in all protected areas came to effect. And late last year, that is around November 2019, the Kenya Plastic Action Plan was effected. In March 2018, plastic bottle ban in Nairobi's protected areas, including like Karura Forest, was also effected. And the first one was in August 2017, when we banned the production, selling, and use of plastic carrier bags. Those are the paper bags, the nylon paper bags. And up to now, we have seen a record of about 80% success rate when it comes to the ban on the plastic carrier bags, which gives us hope that even the ban on single-use plastic is going to be a major success if we all play our part. You probably have been confused at some point on whether the ban is on all plastics or on some plastics. The truth is that the ban is on 10 major items that we have listed here. Without going into details, we will share the presentation with you so that you can look at them in detail. And we have also given the proposed alternatives to these banned items. 10 of them, remember, there are 10 of them, and that is in protected areas only. But remember, we can make this more than just in protected areas, you know, and just make it part of our business DNA to do away with single-use plastics even in our homes. It's a personal responsibility, an individual responsibility, even before we go to corporate or government responsibility. It starts with each one of us. There lies some opportunities to innovate with the ban and as well as with the proposed alternatives. The first one will be a shift to a greener and healthier environment, and we deserve it. I think COVID-19 has presented us an opportunity to see what is possible when there are less emissions into the environment, less disposal of waste into the environment. And we are also looking at job opportunities through the establishment of recycling businesses. Today, the recycling sector is informal, majorly informal. And so by formalizing this sector, that means we will have more recycling businesses coming up. We will have more recycling plants coming up, and that means more opportunities for waste collectors and recyclers, and even people who are going to be operating in those plants. And we are also looking at improved international standards on manufacture of plastic and waste management. However, that does not mean that we are not going, or we are not already facing some challenges when it comes to the implementation of the ban. For instance, there's a lack of information, and that's why, for instance, we are holding this series of webinars so that we create awareness and information around the single-use plastics, the ban itself, and also the alternatives and how they work. So the lack of information, we also lack certification and labeling on alternative materials, so that when you're buying these materials, you need to know whether these are recyclables or not. We have regulation gaps on plastics waste segregation and management, and hopefully Dr. Masharia will help us, look at some of those. We have low voluntary willingness on plastic waste management. As I keep insisting, this is an individual responsibility before it becomes a corporate responsibility, before it becomes an industry responsibility or even a government responsibility. Before we make it a national movement, it needs to start with us. So this willingness, voluntary willingness, needs to start with us, step by step, one by one, and then the effect will eventually, be visible. We have highly competitive prices on alternatives, so that you find, for instance, if it's a plastic bottle, it's cheaper than a glass recyclable bottle. But I wish that we do not look at this on the short term, but we look at it on the longer term. For if you buy, for instance, a plastic bottle, water disposable bottle for 30 shillings, and then you're going to finish the water and dispose of the bottle, and then 2 hours later buy another one, yeah? So at the end of the day, you're going to have spent more than buying maybe a glass bottle for 200 shillings that you're going to reuse over and over again and end up saving the cost. We also have an absence of centralized contact database or directory. And as we said, we are working on this, and this webinar is a step closer to having that directory, because we need to make sure that we have the right alternatives and the right materials on it without confusing, for instance, whether biodegradables should be included in the directory or not. And we shall be clarifying this later in the conversation. The end goal of this mission, of this series of webinars, is for us to shift towards the current linear economy that we are operating in, towards a circular economy. And we want to shift our model where we use renewable energy, and we design out waste and pollution so that waste is no longer to be disposed, but it is used as one of the materials to be recycled and reused into making other products. We also want to keep products and materials in use and regenerate natural systems. Remember, linear economy, at this point, what we are doing, we are just taking, making, and disposing of waste. But with circular economy, we want to reuse, we want to refuse the use of plastics, and we want to recycle and regenerate as much as possible. We have done a trend report on single-use plastics available on our website, and we are also working on another trend report on circular economy that we shall also be circulating. On that note, I would wish to take it back to the moderator, Ebenezer. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much, Josephine. We appreciate you taking us to the first point or the first part of the presentation today. So everyone, you are welcome to the webinar on single-use plastics. We have Karine Bonsma with us, who is the Director of Sustainable Inclusive Business. And we also have Dr. Ayub Macharia, who is the Director of Education and Awareness of the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. So we want to make this a little bit live and lively, so to speak. It's past lunchtime, so I believe all of you have the energy of had your lunch. So you can go to the chat room and quickly just type in what your expectation is for this webinar as we begin. And as we do that, we'll also just run through a short poll that we have the question there. It's not necessarily a question, it's a statement basically saying, I have an understanding of the regulations on single-use plastics. So I just want to gauge and get to understand from our participants today, do you have an understanding of the single-use plastic or not? And at the end, we also want to gauge and see, has this webinar been able to be of value to you? So because one of the things that we want to do is raise awareness on the single-use plastic policies, regulations, and just understanding in terms of how the alternatives look like and what are the benefits. Just as my colleague has mentioned, the objective of the webinar today. So we have about half of you that have taken the poll. We want to just quickly have all of you take the poll, even those that have joined. We are taking a poll. Quickly do that. And if you're finished, you just quickly go to the chat and tell us what your expectation is. We already have some few questions from Teddy, Vesalina, and Tabitha, who already shared the questions earlier. So also feel free to raise your questions so that those questions will be addressed by Dr. Ayub Macharia, who is with us today, and Karine Bonsma, the Director of Sustainable Inclusive Business. Thank you. So allow me to bring in Dr. Ayub Macharia, just again, so that you can hear his voice, and you can also quickly just do a quick introduction. And then I will also allow Karine Bonsma to step in a little bit, and then we will proceed to the next section. Dr. Ayub. Hi, Dr. Ayub, can you hear us? I seem not to be hearing Dr. Ayub. Karine, you can do a quick intro as we try and find out what's the problem with Dr. Ayub is. It could be technology.
Yes, that's great. Thanks, Josephine, indeed, for a very clear, informative overview of what's going on. I would like to sort of raise questions where, or ask you where the most questions are, actually. We like to highlight a few things. One is we have 10 items that are actually combined more than one, because wrappers and crisps packaged and etc. are more than one item, that are not allowed to be used in restricted areas and in beaches. This means that actually the same single-use plastic materials are you're still allowed to use it and buy it in the supermarket, and you can get it everywhere. So there's no ban of the products or the use of the packaging, just not allowed in the restricted areas. And this obviously will impose quite some challenges to the tourism, travel and MICE industry, as Josephine mentioned. So this is where we would like to take the opportunity to run you also through what kind of alternatives, because the alternative for a plastic PET bottle with water might be quite simple and you'll be encouraged by the industry, but also in your own behavior to bring a refillable water bottle. The questions remain that if we do have that in parks, then how do the lodges refill those water bottles? What kind of water solutions are behind it? So is it easy to now come up with bigger dispensers? And how big is the biggest dispenser? And how easy is it actually to set up a water filtering system and bottle your water at the spot in glass bottles? And how now do you dispose these glass bottles which are in the parks and in the lodges in the right way? So these are, I assume, questions people still have, especially in the tourism and travel industry, that some alternatives are fairly easy, but to actually fill refillables or to use reusables, you have to have a bigger solution behind it. The other thing is that we have the support or the push from the government to say, listen, we're not only going to come up with a single-use plastic ban, because those items are really an issue. They are a menace. We don't manage them at all. But what we want to actually increase is the responsibility from the producer's side. So really rethink the materials you're using and make sure that actually the producer remains responsible after end use. So if I have a milk bottle in PET plastic, actually the provider of the milk and the bottle remains responsible for returning or making sure that that bottle doesn't end up in the landfill and in the environment, as we consider that the same. So that is going to be in place. The legislations will be ready probably in September, and that will also provide the industry rules and guidance to actually rethink use of materials and make sure that they feel responsible and have a facilitation in place to return those materials. So one is that we don't litter and that we don't use it when we don't need to use it. But the other thing is that we also need to be able to responsibly dispose it if we are using the materials. So those are actually two different elements, but there are two different developments around plastic waste management in Kenya at the moment. I see a few, I see Ayub is back, and I also see a couple of questions coming in. So maybe we will have Ayub first, and then we can answer some of the questions collectively.
Sure. Thank you so much, Karim. We got Ayub back. I think it was a little bit of network disruption. So Dr. Ayub, we were just starting off the discussion in terms of looking at the single-use plastic regulations and also looking at the policy framework within the context of single-use plastic. So could you just highlight to us the policy framework and regulations to help us understand or have a background before we dive deeper into the discussion today? Dr. Ayub?
Yes, I'm sorry, I found the internet today quite unstable. Then when I've logged in now, I can't see. I don't know whether people can see me because I'm trying to look for the button to be on the screen.
Yes, sure.
But your question,
so
out our experiences on the issue of policy, as demonstrated by Josephine, you are aware that the country, under the leadership of the ministry, has tried to address the plastic menace from diverse fronts, and mainly through policy shifts. And you recall that in 2017 is when we had the first ban on polythene bags, which was followed soon after by dealing with the PET bottles. And then now we are in the third phase, where we are talking about single-use plastics in conservation areas. And at the same time, we have come up with the policy on waste management, the sustainable waste management policy, which is now ready. It has just been adopted by cabinet, and it addresses at length what needs to be done about the all waste, including plastics. And at the same time, we have also addressed the issue of Kenya being a growing economy. We obviously, it is not in the interest of government to slow down the economy or to behave like a developed economy. And in that case, we are coming up with a new regulation to allow the producers of waste, the plastics, an opportunity to participate in cleaning up the environment, so that whatever kind of waste that is being generated, if there is no alternative to certain packaging, then through proper management of the waste, at least the country can bear with that kind of a nuisance, because it has been managed properly. And so we have the extended producer responsibility regulations, which are about to be finalized. We expect it to be finalized by September, to make sure that all producers of waste take care of that waste. And the extended producer responsibility targets about 35% of our waste in this country, which is recyclable. The rest, according to our statistics, is mainly organic, which is 60%. And so you can see the direction the ministry has taken. We will be able to manage 95% of our waste. And so these single-use plastics will no longer be a problem anymore, because the appropriate policies and laws are in place. That is, by the end of this year or early next year, both the bill and the regulation will be out and running. And so we are looking forward to a very clean country, because we have the right direction provided by the government.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Ari, for giving us a background to how the policy sphere looks like, and how the ban on plastic began from 2017 up to this year, when we had the ban on single-use plastic, right from the carrier bags. But just for clarity purposes, someone may ask that now there is a ban on single-use plastic. Is it only in specific areas, or is it in the entire country? Because people have been having the misconception that you're no longer supposed to use the PET bottles when you're walking around town. You're no longer supposed to use generally the single-use plastic when you're going to your restaurant. So the public probably has been having a panic in this area. Could you clarify on this?
Now, so at the moment, the ban on single-use plastics applies only to protected areas. And so, these protected areas are several. And if you look at our website, if you visit our website, we have the action plan for implementation of the single-use plastics ban, where we have categories of protected areas, which include national parks, national reserves and wildlife sanctuaries, national monuments, such as the Kaya Forest, biosphere reserves, World Heritage Sites, Ramsar sites, beaches, and even protected forests. Those are the areas that are covered at the moment by the ban. However, we know that there are two ways in which these plastics get into these areas. One of them being direct introduction by people, where you carry the plastic and then you dispose it there, you will drop it in the protected area. And at the same time, especially for our beaches and even our rivers, which are also key areas, key protected areas, there is what we call drifting, where the waste is carried by storm water, and then it is the single-use plastics are introduced into those areas. Although this area is not covered at the moment by the definition, the scope so far, we see a scenario where it is arguable that we may need to, in future, to expand the area covered by the ban to also look at the whole issue of addressing the single-use plastics, even in other areas, other than just protected areas, to address the issue of drifting into those areas. However, if you look at the regulations that we have put in place and the measures we have taken, we are slowly getting there. But based on your question, for now, it is only in the protected areas. No entry of these single-use plastics there.
Okay. So what I hear you saying is that progressively you might think about expanding the area of which this ban covers. That could be in future, somewhere in the future, depending on how the government reviews, as you said, the disposal of single-use plastic. So we probably will be waiting to hear from the government in terms of what do you see in the near future. But let me also bring Karim into the discussion here and ask, we've looked at, Dr. Mashara has taken us through the regulation in terms of where it covers. So what is the obligation of the private sector in this case? And how does the private sector come in terms of ensuring that we are able to comply and also adopt sustainable business practices within our sphere as businesses?
Yeah, so where the private sector comes in, ultimately, and that Dr. Macharia can confirm and provide details on, but ultimately, the government in Kenya is looking at making the private sector responsible for all the waste streams. So being the responsible producer for all 17 waste streams we have. So it's not only plastics. These legislations on the EPR are actually not anchored in our waste management bill, because that bill is still, it's at Parliament for approval, and it's very progressive and very ambitious and has lots of circular economy elements in it, but it has not been approved yet. The EPR will be anchored in the MCA, which is already existing, and therefore it's easy to, a strategy to be adopted into legislations needs no approval of the Parliament. But where we come in it's twofold. So one is on the producer side, but one is also on the industry side of the users. So as a travel industry, you're more of a user than the producer. And obviously you need to encourage your people and facilitate your tourists with alternatives for plastics. And I see a lot of questions coming in, quite practical questions on which and what can you use and what can you not. So maybe I would take the opportunity to look at that, because that's, we can talk about many angles, but I think this is where people are worried. I see there's also an emerging waste coming from COVID management, which is true. We have a massive increase of single-use plastic just because of single-use face masks, plastic gloves, we have sanitizers, and those are actually quite tricky plastic materials because they could be considered as medical waste. However, at the moment, the government has decided that it's a personal responsibility. So it's an individual responsibility to dispose it. But those kind of things will impose a risk to waste pickers, for instance. And as Josephine mentioned, a lot of our waste management at the moment, even through EPR, so even through businesses that are responsible, is to invest in collectors, into waste collectors. And a lot of them are still informal waste collectors. So we need to come up with solutions for that. And at the moment, that is still your personal responsibility. So maybe Ayub Macharia can respond to that specific COVID plastic waste as well, because that actually occurred while developing the single-use plastic ban and while the EPR is being developed. So maybe you can respond to this very urgent matter before we dive into other elements.
Just before Dr. Aib responds to that, we'll also be taking more of the questions here. I'm seeing more questions coming in, which is a good thing. We also had some other questions which came in before the webinar. We took a poll just before we began, at the beginning, and just to share the findings here. So we posed the statements, I have an understanding of the regulations on single-use plastic. And the results here show that 20% strongly agree, meaning that 20% of the participants have a strong understanding of the regulations. 66% agree. 14% disagree, meaning 14% do not have an understanding of the regulations, and 2% strongly disagree. So that's a total of 16% of the participants today who do not have an understanding of the regulations on single-use plastic. So we'll try and address the questions that are coming in to help us understand the single-use regulations. Of course, Josephine began with a presentation looking at what the items that are included in the ban, and Dr. Ayub took us through the journey in terms of how the regulations were formulated, and quickly just Karim took us through the obligation of the private sector in terms of what is our obligation as the private sector in terms of complying to the regulations that exist. So of course, so I also see a comment here. We'd like to apologize that our website is down. I saw a comment there. We are working on it so that it is back. Sorry for that. But our website is www.sustainableinclusivebusiness.org. We'll be working on that so that it's up, so that you're able to get access to the trend report as well as a short course to understand a single-use plastic. Now, we see Eddie saying that his expectation is on alternative ideas regarding alternative for plastic, and also support from the government when switching from single-use plastic to more durable products. Maureen says that she's running a mobile camp and need to make ice in plastic tubes to transport frozen meat to the camp. Will the plastic tubing for ice be allowed? Good. So I'll allow Dr. Macharia to take that question, even as he tackles the question that, or raises the concern that Karim just brought in terms of the waste that came in as a result of people using PPEs, and how is that structured, or how does the government see in terms of controlling this going forward? Dr. Ayub.
Thank you, Amadi. This issue of COVID is a very important aspect in waste management at the moment, because what we have seen when COVID came around, we all agree that there has been a lot of plastics which is in use to manage COVID. We have plastics in terms of the masks. Some of the masks we are using, they have some percentage of plastics, and even how they are packaged. If you look at how they are sold on the street, they are put in plastic bags. And this is not only happening in Kenya, it is happening globally, and is a challenge. And of course, those who are bringing the polythene, especially the packaging, you cannot bring packaging in Kenya if you are not allowed to do so by the Environment Agency, NEMA. And so what happens when one is bringing the plastic is that they have to seek for permission to use that kind of packaging, and then they have to fulfill certain conditions based on the licensing. And so we don't need to worry much about the containers, because they're already regulated by NEMA. However, the mask itself has a lot of plastic in it, and that is worrisome to us. We are worried because people are not following the advisory that is given by the Ministry of Health, because the masks are dropped anywhere. They are dropped in our regular waste containers, or even dropped on the street. And that is a challenge we have, because once it is dropped on the street, then it contributes to the increase in plastics in our environment, and the chances of contamination and helping in spreading the virus is quite real. I guess most of you are aware of how to manage the mask. If you are at home in the village, those of us who are watching us from the village, you are supposed to, when you remove your mask, you put it in the pit latrine, or if there are no pit latrines, you dig a hole and then you bury it in there. Then if you're in an urban area, like in our estates, we are supposed to put our masks in bags, which as an estate, you consult with the public health officer, where you are supposed to drop your waste so that it is picked by NEMA licensed trucks and taken for incineration. And the same goes for our bus stops and our shopping malls, our shopping centers. But this is a topic where the levels of compliance is still very low, and all of us are worried about the levels of public compliance by the public in this directive about managing COVID-related waste.
So just also to address one more question that one of the participants asked, Maureen, who was asking that she runs mobile camp, and she needs to transport frozen meat to the camps. So will she be allowed to use the plastic tubes so that she's able to transport the meat into the plastic tubing for when she's going to the camp? I guess this boils down to the lists of the items that are included in the single-use plastic.
I think we have given alternatives, and Josephine took us through the alternatives. Single-use plastics, if you look at the categorization that Josephine showed us, anything that is packaged using plastic,
possibly just
single-use plastics, it will not be around, and so she needs to use other containers. They are available. There are some containers that have that can have airtight locking covers, and I think it is possible to still visit the park and carry your food using alternative containers.
Thank you, Doc. We also have a question from Paris Olo. It says, the recently launched MOT safety and health protocols advises accommodation providers to avail pocket-sized bottle of sanitizers to guests. So goes on to say that this will be a menace. So will we rather advocate for refillable sanitizer dispensers? But I think this is also addressed in, as you rightfully said, the providing of alternatives for some of these items that are addressed here. So I think without question, it will be easily answered if you look at the list that Josephine just shared that has the items that are within the ban and the alternatives that are recommended by the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. So, Karim, just a quick one on a question here. And in terms of the question that was raised on some of the items that are coming out of waste within the period of the pandemic. What will be your proposal in terms of how businesses are supposed to handle this, and also from an individual perspective, considering that this also has created a challenge to the environment in terms of the amount of waste that is coming to the environment?
Yes, sorry, I didn't really get the specific question you wanted me to respond to.
So the question is, how are we as individuals or as businesses supposed to manage or support the government in terms of managing the waste that is coming from PPEs that people are using during this period of the pandemic?
Yeah. So I think it's a bit the same as that the behavior we need to apply for any other single-use plastic at the moment, because we don't consider it medical waste as such, but I think separate collection like Dr. Macharia recommended should be in place for also proper dispose, because I see a question about would you recommend burning these type of waste, and I wouldn't, because with burning of materials that contain plastic, we pollute the air tremendously, and it's really, really unhealthy. So I wouldn't do that, and you don't know exactly which kind of toxins are coming into the air. So I would not recommend burning. Although the behavior of burning is a good sign of Kenyans who actually do not want to see waste and litter around. So it's a good habit to clean up, but I wouldn't recommend burning the materials. I also see, so what Dr. Macharia also recommends, so that is, in terms of that, we need to collect that separately and get proper disposal opportunities for that on a separate level as well, for all the gloves, for all the masks. If you look at other items like the plastic for ice cubes, there we can find reuse materials, so reuse products that you actually can use. You have the ice blocks you can put in freezers, so we really need to look at alternatives. And the minute we talk about alternatives, there are actually two things. You have either reusable alternatives, so you just have containers, or you have true alternatives in terms of different material, but they have the same function as well, but they're not reusable. For instance, paper straws instead of plastic straws. And I think what we need to reconsider is, when do we use which materials and for what purpose, and is that really truly necessary? So in this whole conversation, there's always also the question not only about recycling or replacing, but also about reducing the use of single-use plastic in general. And that can be covered by reuse models. For the alternatives, one is, do we still need to have that single-use approach? So even a straw, which is made of paper, you will use it once and you throw it away. Do we want to stick to that mentality, of using things once and then dispose it, or do we want to change that mentality as well? The other thing is there are compostable, biodegradable, bioplastics, and all those kind of alternatives available that look like plastics, but they are not behaving like plastics in terms of how they decompose. The tricky thing about that at the moment is that we do not have proper labeling and coding in place. So we basically don't know what we're using. We don't know whether there is a component of plastic or petroleum-based material inside. And if there's none and it looks like plastics and we end up putting it in the plastic collection, we're actually ruining recycling opportunities. So it contaminates the plastics that we are able to recycle. So for the alternatives that look like amazing because you throw them in nature and they decompose, we still have a long way to go. And it starts with, first, I think, the behavior. Do we really need, again, an alternative to use something single once? And secondly, if we do consider that being the case, and we need to, can we label and code them appropriately? Because a lot of those materials also, they only decompose in laboratory criteria. So they say they decompose in 7 days, but that's only the case when it's 60 degrees or it's so much moisture, etc. And we do not have that in reality. It's not a reality projection of how that material behaves. So there we have to be very careful in what we do. I saw that Maggie had an alternatives for plastic shields that are compostable, and she was asking about whether the CAPs can approve them. And I think this is again something that the government needs to provide very clear guidance on and coding before we can approve that, because we really need to make sure that consumers understand that those materials are not made of plastics, but they look like plastic, and also that we are able to dispose them. We don't have much compost facilities in the country, unfortunately, although 60% is organic waste. Those are some of the concerns if you look into. So we do push for first reduce the use or refuse, and then come up with reusable models, and then in the end it becomes maybe recyclable or it decomposes.
Yeah, thank you so much, Karin. You also bring in an interesting elements there in terms of talking about biodegradables. And as you rightfully said, Maggie was asking how can KEBS assist on this. We also had Teddy asking that we have the target as a nation to plant 1.8 million trees in the next few years. So does that mean that we'll be using 1.8 million single-use plastic the way you normally have those trees in a nursery and then go to replant them, or what would be the solutions or alternative to use? So in this case, of course, something that comes to mind is the biodegradable. So Dr. Ayub, are you aware of what NEMA and also KEBS stand on biodegradable in this case? This institution, NEMA, which is under the Ministry of Environment and Forestry. You're on mute, sir. Dr. You're on mute.
Thank you. In my earlier explanation, I explained that use of plastics, including polythene bags, we still have a few that are still around. But the general statement is that all of them are banned. That is, the Gazette notice banned everything. However, the country, the way we are implementing the ban, we are using a phased model. We have phased its implementation, the implementation of the ban. We hope that in the coming years, I don't know how many, we shall not have any polythene bag in the environment. Even the same is going for single-use plastics. But you see, like for polythene bags where we have a total ban everywhere, we are using a phased approach. Now, for the case of the tubings for planting the tree seedlings, that one falls under the category of the retained polythene bags, which will be phased out once alternatives are in place. And there is a lot of research that is currently going on to look for an alternative to those tubings, those polythene tubings. And as soon as the alternative is there, then there will be no more licensing to those who supply those kind of tubings for planting the tree seedlings. But for now, we are not under any threat. Our 10% tree cover aspiration is not under any threat from the ban on polythene bags, because already NEMA has licensed those bags that are currently in use for the tree tubings. And the same goes for any other plastic that you see around. It is licensed by NEMA, but with the conditions. Every year, they submit a request to NEMA asking for an extension. And if an alternative is found in the course of the year, I can assure you that that polythene bag will not be there next year, because there is a total ban on polythene bags. So the ones that are there are living on borrowed time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ari. Thank you. Very clear on that in terms of the implementation is phased, but the general ban basically says that all the plastics are banned at this moment, but it's only that the implementation is phased. So Paris also asks a question in terms of, do you have any leads on NEMA licensing infectious waste handlers in Mara? So I'll just take a couple of questions that you'll be able to handle. So if you have any information on that, you can clarify. And also, I think Lillian was asking, do we encourage burning of mosques as a way of disposal? I think Karin already touched on that in terms of, is this the best way or not? Because it also leads to increase of carbon emissions into the environment. Again, that affects. Maureen clarifies on her question, saying that she means the big blocks of ice to keep meat frozen in cooler boxes. I think Dr. already mentioned that those are not allowed in the park. So we'll have to look at an alternative to use that. So Dr. back to the question that Paris was asking in terms of NEMA licensing infectious waste handlers within the MARA. Do you have any information on this?
Come again, the question?
Possibly we can ask her to clarify. Paris or lawyer says that, or it's more or less, is it a question or is it a statement? It's a question. Any leads on NEMA licensed infectious waste handlers within MARA? So I presume that she's saying that NEMA has licensed infectious waste handlers within the MARA.
Yes. That question regards management of medical waste. You know, infectious waste is medical waste. Actually, even our mask is regarded as infectious waste. Although it looks like it's okay to throw it anyhow, but we don't know who is infected, and so it is infectious waste in the sense that anybody can be infected from that mask which is thrown anywhere. Now, according to waste management regulations of 2006, medical waste is supposed to be handled by institutions that are licensed by NEMA. And so in a hospital, the hospital cannot just give its waste to anybody, to the same trucks that we have in our estates. There is a certain category of service providers who deal with medical waste, and they are licensed to carry that waste, and they carry it using special trucks. So they are not like the trucks we use for garbage. They are, the ones for medical waste are not open. They are closed. They are also labeled because they are carrying infectious waste. And also, for anybody to be licensed to operate a medical waste truck, you must indicate to NEMA which waste handling facility you are taking your waste to. Either mainly an incinerator. So you must identify an incinerator where you'll be taking your waste. And then you are supposed to carry documents to show that the waste has moved from point A to point B to make sure that the waste is not disposed anywhere along the way. We must make sure that it is incinerated. So for that case, about the MARA, what that person needs to do when the trucks are being licensed, normally the license is for the whole country because there are very few of such trucks. There could be some counties. If we go county by county, we may have some counties without those kind of trucks. And since NEMA is a national institution, normally those trucks are licensed to operate nationally. And so what that person needs to do is to get into the nearest NEMA office. They will get into the database and they can provide a list of the trucks that are allowed to carry medical waste. And then they make contact with that truck and they will come and carry waste from the MARA. So these trucks can carry waste from anywhere. Only that they take the waste to particular incinerators, not any incinerator they find on the way.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Karin, there's a question that Vasilina asked in terms of looking at a database for alternatives. As an institution, as SIB, are you working on a database on alternative single-use plastic? And if you're in the process, what should people look out for?
Yeah, we're currently trying to compose one, and it will definitely be a dynamic directory because this is a continuously developing story with new rules and with new bans and with new alternatives and with new solutions and new innovations. So we will compose a list of things that you can use, but also to provide what I see here. It's very important to see what is being licensed. So we will provide more information about biodegradables and compostables, as it is quite a tricky topic. And we will combine also the what is there in standards, what kind of standards are in place and how to implement, and whether that is easy and practical. Because that's also a question I still have, I think, to the ministry myself. Now that this is a crisis of COVID we all have to face and deal with, it's quite complicated to find out now what to do with the waste and where and who. And instead of people going individually as a business to find out in the nearest county or nearest office of NEMA, where's the list with the trucks? Is there not an opportunity or a possibility to, especially now that we have the single-use plastic bans in restricted areas, to provide the industry with those lists of trucks and collectors that are allowed to pick the specific waste and that handle it in the way it should be handled? Because it's actually an old law that the hospitality and tourism industry should, by law, recycle 50% of their total waste already by licensed recyclers. And a lot of people are not aware. So I think there might also be an opportunity for the ministry to provide more proactively, so besides legislations and laws, to help out with actually having those lists ready. And institutes like Sustainable and Inclusive Business under KEPSA, but also COM, the Kenyan Association for Manufacturers, and all membership organizations that have industry affected by this can then easily access and don't have to search for it on an individual basis.
So when again you talk about the biodegradables, Lewis here says that when you talk about single-use plastic, we have to talk about compostable plastics as an alternative, and that there are standards for home composting, hence we do not have to fully rely on composting facilities. What's your take on this?
Yeah, again, I find it a complicated topic because there are plastics or biodegradables that biodegrade but still contain plastics. And there are biodegradables that are not containing plastics because they are bio-based. And different materials and compositions of materials have different decomposable ability. And it's not really well labeled. It doesn't really matter if something is biodegradable in 7 months, but it ends up in the environment or in the ocean. It still kills animals and biodiversity. It still leaks microbeads. So again, I think we have to be very careful. We don't know even how to, we are not able to manage our plastics well yet. So now we come up with a different material that looks like plastics and that have a very different way of now being treated. So it needs to be very clear, what are we allowed to use for which products and where are we allowed to use it and how to dispose it then properly. And that needs to come with labeling and with coding and with the facilities that are being offered to handle your waste. So you can ensure that you deal with it in the right way. Otherwise, we keep on going in cycles and we are going to contaminate recyclable materials. We are going to dispose still in the environment and then it's not completely plastic free. So it requires a lot of information and knowledge and it needs to be very, very clear. And that's not the case at all. I mean, everyone is still learning.
Yeah, so when you mentioned that in terms of the choice of material that we are supposed to use. So I just read one of the questions that Maureen asked, looking at the interpretation of the single-use plastic ban, which generally says that we're not supposed to be using the single-use plastic. And as well, we know that the plastic carrier bags are banned. But she goes ahead to ask that she sees the list that the crisps should be in a paper bag. So how would you then carry crisps in a paper bag and go with it, and yet single-use plastic is allowed? But again, this is, I think, misinterpretation of the regulation itself, as I see, because the regulation basically says that the use of plastic bags is banned. And I guess in this case, paper bags means the paper in terms of the one that is made from as a product from wood and not the plastic bags. I think it's because we're used to calling them paper bags. So that's where
I wanted to comment, Amadi.
Yes.
You cannot carry a polythene bag in public. You'll be arrested.
Yes.
Yes, they were banned. I said that they can only come to you when they are carrying products. It's because of the products that are put in there that NEMA has considered that there is no alternative. And for that reason, then they allowed that polythene bag to survive as packaging for another 1 year. But otherwise, if you're a member of the public and maybe the polythene bag has finished its whatever you wanted to do with it, and then you carry it on the street, you'll be arrested. You are using a polythene bag, and by law, you are already committing an offense. So it should not be, you should not be seen with it entering the park with the polythene bag. Now, this issue of the biodegradables, I wanted to comment that that is a discussion that is going on. And we don't have an answer yet. The country has not allowed use of biodegradables at the moment. Biodegradables are not in use. So what is happening now is the country is getting to develop its capacity on handling biodegradables, alternatives to plastics. Those people who say that they have biodegradable plastics, and we have banned the petroleum-based plastics. As a country, we are doing our studies on biodegradable plastics now, but they are not in the market yet. So that discussion is still something under study.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Ali. So generally, to emphasize on the question that I think it was Maureen had, is that some of the products that you see on the single-use plastic ban in protected areas, you can use them in other areas, but you'll not be allowed to go with them in the protected areas.
Yes.
So which means if you're in town, you have your pack of chips, you can eat that there, but you cannot carry the pack of chips, or if you like, call it crisps, to the national parks. And that is what Dr. Ayub was saying, that the government might decide to extend the area of this ban in future. But at the moment, they're starting with the protected areas, which include the beaches, includes national parks, reserves, conservancies, and forests, such like areas. So that is a pointer for you, even as you, there's a question that someone was asked, how will this be implemented within the tour vans? Of course, if you're in a tour van and you're in Nairobi, no problem. But if you're going into Nairobi National Park, then you're not supposed to go with those items into the park. I think that is clear. And if it's not clear, you can still ask the question so that we make it more clear to it. Here, I think Dr. Wandaka says that Dr. Ayub has informative responses here, and was also looking at the issue of COVID-19. I think we have already advised that. I think the question here is, please advise if NEMA or Ministry of Environment and Forestry or even SIB are considering capacity enhancement to waste handlers in this aspect. So is the Ministry of Environment and Forestry planning to enhance the capacity of waste handlers? I think either through training, awareness raising, through the regulations that are existing.
Yes, yes, we are planning to roll out a big program on addressing the waste handlers. As you are aware, when we started, we said that the country has made a radical shift in waste management, where you put your waste in the dustbin and then you put it in the truck and then to the dump site. Now, we shall not continue that way. We want to change into circular economy, where we will extract maximum value from all waste. And in this regard, we will be required to separate waste at source and into various fractions. And these fractions will be transported separately to various destinations. Now, we also have the COVID virus, which is here with us, COVID-19. And for this reason, you see, it requires that we handle waste in a specialized way, because the people are interacting with that waste, and we don't know how many people will get infected in the country. And so we are keen to roll out a program, and it will start. We will start rolling it out in the next between 1 and 2 months. The program will be out. We will start with the developing of a curriculum for the West handlers, and then we will roll it out to the West handlers. We are working closely with the counties on that. So it is something that is in our program, and we are receiving some funding from the Danish government to roll it out. You are muted. Amadi, you are muted.
Oh, sorry. I didn't observe that. Thank you, Dr. I think Nick Macau says here that, I mean, it's better for us to use filtration systems rather than using the plastic bottles, because again, it means that this is, we have bottles that we're required to bring back to the system and trying to recycle it. So I think he says that the best solution would be to having bottle-less solutions that dispensing water immediately after purification. So I think that's a suggestion which, of course, if I look at the recommendations on the single-use plastic ban, that's one of the areas that are recommended there. Cholet, if I'm pronouncing the name correctly, asked how long then before we talk about integrated waste management solutions? I think Karin, you can tackle this question. Should I ask how long then do we have before we have an integrated waste management solution?
Okay, integrated waste management solutions take time. As we mentioned before, that requires a proper waste management bill that is at Parliament. And we have to acknowledge that putting an integrated waste management system together is a complete infrastructure and rules and regulations and policies that need to be supported by the government. It needs to be carried by the private sector and by individuals. And to give you an example, in the Netherlands, it took 10 to 15 years to have a proper integrated waste management system in place throughout the country, and with the right private sector stakes, levies, EPRs, as well as on a personal level to really have proper waste collection, different days, different materials, having separation at source. So I think at the moment, and Dr. Macharia can correct me, but the government is working to get the frameworks in place and how to go about it, because at the moment we don't have much system in place in Kenya. So we need to still create it, and we need to see where we are able. And the government looks at the private sector as an enabling factor to put infrastructure in place for this. But it will take time to implement it and to make it really integrated and streamline it across the country.
Yeah, thanks, Karin.
I can add there.
Okay.
What we are doing, Amadi, is that our policy was adopted by Cabinet on 28th of May this year. Mm-hmm. So we are just a month old after adoption by Cabinet. However, we have started rolling out the policy in Nairobi County, where we have developed an action plan, a Nairobi County Waste Management Action Plan. And that is the beginning of rollout of the integrated system, where we need the waste to be separated at source, we need material recovery facilities, we need composting facilities, the recyclers must be sourced, and we have to engage them to make sure that as much waste as possible is taken up by the recyclers and also the composters. And so, like Karin said, the country has started that move. We already have a document, the action plan, that is guiding Nairobi County. And in the next few days, we will be on this platform explaining to the Kenyans on what we are doing in Nairobi, because there is a lot of good things happening in Nairobi towards the implementation of the circular model of waste management in Nairobi. So we have started, and at the moment we are looking for those people who have invested in composting, because that is where we want to start. We are also in discussion with the recyclers, but the main challenge that we have is the public, Wanjiku, Mwananchi, because they are not sorting their waste at source. Our waste is contaminated. Even when we tell the recyclers to come for that waste and make organic fertilizer, they complain because they cannot use it in the way it is, because it is contaminated. Otherwise, it cannot qualify in the using the Kenya Bureau of Standards, the standards that have been set under the Kenya Bureau of Standards. So we must have behavior change by all of us, so that we generate clean waste that is not contaminated. And so let's all promise that we will start sorting at source, and then the rest of the system is ready to roll. Thank you.
Let me bring in someone else as well. I just want to very briefly touch upon what Dr. Macharia said. I said, because I agree, it's a hand-in-hand approach. We all need to be all in on this. However, if you want to separate at source on household level, you need to also be able to then have a waste collector that picks it by source, and that is not possible yet. So it's a bit of a cat and mouse kind of game, or who comes first with saying, okay, your paper waste. So in the Netherlands, for instance, your paper waste goes in a different dustbin, then you have your plastic and it's being collected on a different day, and then you have your greens and it's being collected on a different day, and there's a max to it, otherwise you have to pay, because apparently you generate a lot of non-recyclable, non-compostable. So on the general waste, you actually have a max. And so it's, and if you don't dispose it in that way and you don't separate at source, you will be fined. So that we don't have in place yet. So I would love to separate at source, but ultimately it goes all in one truck, and then they separate at a site. If you find your recycler, like for instance, the Taka solutions. So we need to make sure that we have awareness campaigns whereby the citizens are encouraged, but also being facilitated. Because if you encourage them and then there's no dustbin, or there's no separation picking or collection, then you lose interest. We had an example in the Netherlands where we collected glass, brown glass, white glass, and green glass. And we were all very motivated to do that separate. And we did it in separate bins, big bins in front of the supermarkets, underground. And then one day, the truck came and he picked first the green, then the brown, and then the white, and threw it all together. I think it took us as a country, we were demotivated for a couple of years to separate our waste again, because we knew it was collected all in one go. So I have a very great, and Dr. Macharia, our friend Bernard Merks is in our webinar, and he is a plastic expert, but he is also very involved in the single-use plastic ban in Europe. And he is super aware of all those integrated waste management systems. So maybe he can contribute and motivate and advise us a bit more. So I don't know where he is, but maybe Ebenezer, you can give him a minute.
Yeah, sure.
Dear all, can you hear me? Because maybe the line is not so very good. Is it okay?
Yes.
Can you hear my voice?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
But we also want to see you.
Now you can't see me. My video is not working. I'm in the Brussels office in between two meetings, but I wanted to use the opportunity to say hello to some friends which I've met before during my recent venue to Kenya. Thank you, Karen, for putting all this weight on my shoulder. So, yeah, I've heard part of your discussion, and I think it's all very valid. One thing which struck me when I was in Kenya last time, and correct me, I'm not the expert for Kenya, but I've seen that a lot of material has been collected and then shipped to other countries. And I think one of the missing links is certainly if you want to go to more circular, is also to invest in an infrastructure where you can actually convert the waste back into raw materials and use the raw materials in your own country. And I think that is a vital part of, because there's no use to collect PET bottles and then ship them to South Africa, to China, because all the added value is going out of the country. So I think it's better to stick to a more selective collection where with products to start with, where you know there is a market uptake possibility within the Kenyan borders or in the surrounding countries. And then to build a recycling factory is, in my view, a must. And a recycling factory is not a sorting factory, because that's also an important one, but a recycling factory is actually a factory where you turn waste into raw material again. So washing plant, sorting plant, extrusion, bringing it back with, on the level of virgin plastic, so it can replace virgin plastic. And if I remember well, Kenya is importing a lot of virgin plastic. So if you can use part of the resources you already have to replace that import, I think there is a win-win-win situation. So it is a litter issue, less litter issue. It is social an improvement. It's a financial improvement, and there's a lot of jobs. So you create a lot of jobs. So I think it's a win-win-win thing, and for sure, education is a vital part of that outcome. So I wanted to give you that as a kind of reflection, and I'm looking forward to follow up on that in the next occasion.
Thank you very much. And that's actually a nice opportunity to mention that this is more or less a kickoff of a series we will provide collectively with the government, with the Ministry of Environment and NEMA on circular economy. And what you're mentioning again is rethinking materials. When do we use what? How can we not only dispose it, but reuse it or recycle it? And actually avoid using raw materials over and over again. So on the circular economy, we will organize a series of webinars that will dive into various topics, whether it's plastic or it's waste management or it's redesign or it's regenerative agriculture. So we have many topics to address that are all contributing to a sustainable and an inclusive world with a circular economy model. So allow me to make that announcement, Dr. Macharia.
Yes, it's true. It's true, we are coming up with a calendar.
Yes.
Many topics, yes.
Yes, many topics to try and inform everyone really well.
And many teachers.
Good. Thank you so much. I see we are 1 minute past our webinar time. As Karim mentioned, we'll be having a series of webinars, and I'm so sure that you plan to stay with us for 1 hour 30 minutes, and we are very grateful for that, for you staying with us for 1 hour 30 minutes since 2. It's now 3:31. We'll just ask you to take a final poll as we conclude the webinar. We'll be having a series of these webinars on a weekly basis so that we have more interaction and in-depth discussion into policy, so that we're able to understand some of these areas deeply and raise your questions even to the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, and even with the experts that we have, including Karim Bomsma and other experts that we'll be including in the discussions. We generally don't want to take your time for so long. We'll just allow us about 3 minutes so that we close at 3:35 as we take the poll. Closing remarks from Dr. Ayub?
Well, mine is to say that the government is keen to ensure that we continue guiding the country on waste management, and we are committed to creating public awareness for people to understand the new way of the new shift in waste management from linear to circular economy. And so there'll be a lot of public awareness that we will start doing in the next 1 month to make people aware of that. And we are also encouraging the private sector to invest in waste management, because now the policy framework is there and the government is ready to continue giving the private sector an opportunity to be the movers of these waste management initiatives. For the public, let's kindly support the government, separate your waste at source, and make sure your waste is disposed properly. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ayub Mashaya, and thank you for taking your time to join us in this discussion today. And we hope that you will accept our invitation to invite you to subsequent webinars so that you can debunk some of the myths that are existing and help most of our participants understand policy, regulation, and even generally the shift from linear to circular economy. Asante sana, Dr. Karim?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I will keep it very brief. To inform you well, please inform us on what you need. What kind of information are you looking for? What are you struggling with? What kind of support? Also visit our website, sustainableinclusivebusiness.org. There you can find a crash course, fact sheets, new developments. We will work on the alternative directory, but also you will find a new schedule on the webinars that are coming up, and also suggest us what we need to dive into and delve into deeper to make collectively Kenya a better place.
Director of this business. So we wrap up with our poll, which we are showing that the expectation, if we were able to meet your expectation. So here we see that 25% say that they strongly agree, 72% say that they agree, and 3% say that they disagree. So we hope that in the next webinar we'll be able to also include some of the recommendations from the 3% so that we can take the 3% to agree that we have met the expectation. Otherwise, it's only for participating, and we shall share the PowerPoint presentation as I see you requesting here. Thank you so much for participation, and thank you for the discussion. Asante. So we'll say goodbye to all of you.
Thank you.
Goodbye, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Asante sana, Karin and Dr. Ayub.
Thanks,
And
everyone.
also Bernard.
Thanks, bye.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone. Thanks.
Thank you, everybody.